What does a foreigner do to save himself and his family when they're caught in a political situation before it's too late? Hello and welcome to our channel. Today I'll show you an American suspense thriller film called No Escape. Let's check it out.
The movie scene begins with a meeting between the Prime Minister of a South Asian country in talks with the representation of a foreign company known as Cardiff. In a sudden twist of events, the meeting is hijacked by rebels and they take the life of the ruler. When the aide of the ruler hears the sounds of gunshots coming from the meeting room, he runs in and sees the body of his principal on the floor. Without wasting time, he places a knife across his throat and moves it in a vertical direction.
Please don't ask what happens to him. Really hate to be the bearer of bad news.
In the next scene, a family of 4 is seen on a plane. The father, Jack, his wife, Annie, and their 2 daughters, Lucy and Bees, are making their way to the same Asian country where the coup plotters took the life of the Prime Minister. Jack is a staff of Cardiff. His assignment is to help the country set up a freshwater plant of some sort. Bees temporarily loses her doll, and a man, Hammond, sitting behind them, picks it up and hands it over to her. As they arrive in the said country, Jack is met with his first disappointment when he finds out that his phone wouldn't work in this country. Hammond, who seems to be quite familiar with the country, helps them out with their ride to the hotel. He would also be staying in there. They find a cab driver nicknamed Kenny Rogers, who looks and sounds nothing like the legendary singer. As they drive to their hotel, Jack notices an unusual activity of soldiers in the streets. When they arrive at the hotel, they noticed it falls short in several basic necessities. There is no internet connection, and the phones and TV are also not working. Jack, who is probably used to a system where everything works, goes to the receptionist to find out why their services are not top-notch as expected. Of course, the receptionist is just as clueless as they come and does not provide any satisfactory answers to his questions. Later that night, as Jack is awakened by some noise, he turns to find his wife who is missing and gets to look for her. Thank heavens she is fine, she's just sitting in the bathroom at an ungodly hour and crying. Jack apologizes, probably for dragging her halfway across the world to a place where the TV doesn't work. Sorry, Annie, the next few hours will make you realize that the absence of internet connectivity is really no big deal. You just hang in there. The next day, Jack goes to the receptionist and asks if his company called. The receptionist tells him that his company has not reached out. He also asks for a newspaper for the day, but the receptionist doesn't have any available. Jack decides to go into the town to get one. After looking around for a while, he comes across an elderly man who gives him the only newspaper written in English. However, it is a 3-day-old paper. From the stares of locals and the general atmosphere, Jack almost feels that something is off. When he takes the old newspaper, he turns to find a company of fully kitted military men.
Geez, I only came to get the papers. How is that a crime? He looks in the opposite direction and sees a mob fearlessly walking towards the military men.
Jack freezes in a mix of fear, shock, and confusion. One of the men in the mob attempts to throw a petrol bomb at the police, but a policeman shoots at him. The shot seems to jolt Jack to reality, and he knows it's time to bolt. As he runs, the entire streets are filled with violence. What he just experienced was a confrontation between the military and rebels. He gets close to his hotel and sees a huge number of these rebels. He watches in horror as they drag out a colleague of his and take his life. One of the rebels sees him and calls the attention of the others to get him. Jack runs as fast as he can, even as the mob pursues hard after him. He barely makes it back to his hotel and finds out that the hotel staff is trying to lock the doors and keep the mob outside. These employees are, however, no match for the mob. They gain entrance into the hotel and shoot at the staff. Jack rushes back to his hotel room and sees his wife and Bees preparing to go for a swim. He tells her what he just experienced, and they discover to their horror that Lucy has gone swimming alone. Jack rushes out of the room to find her. Annie barricades the room, and the rebels gain access to the floor and begin a door-to-door search. Annie is frightened and tells Bees to lock herself anyway.
The switch from an innocent family trying to settle down in a new and strange country to one trying to save their lives is brilliantly demonstrated in the movie. The harrowing experience is traumatic and not something that anyone looks forward to. Unfortunately, people can get caught in crossfires and be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Jack finds Lucy swimming and tries to get her out. He sees some of the rebels approaching and quickly blocks the door before grabbing Lucy. He hurriedly makes his way back upstairs with Lucy in his hands as he tries to go to their room, but a machete-wielding rebel confronts him and seeks to hack him. Hammond appears and saves him. Jack gets to the room and he tells his family to move to the top of the building. After some arguments, they decide it is for the best and prepare to go to the top of the building. They manage to get to the top of the building and find other survivors there. When Jack speaks with some of the people there in a bid to make sense of all that is happening, he is told that the rebels are protesting the presence of the foreigners who they believe have taken over their waters. Jack is obviously confused about this, as he thought that his company was simply there to help. Moments later, a helicopter approaches them. They wave in joy and relief as they believe it is coming to their rescue. Unfortunately, this is not so, as these die-hard rebels are piloting the helicopter. They open fire at these survivors. The tail of the helicopter, however, gets caught in some obstruction and it crashes, exploding and taking out more people. Jack and his family, however, survive. Before they could heave a sigh of relief, the barricaded door to the top of the building is compromised and the relentless rebels gain access to the top of the building. Jack knows it is time to escape and finds a building next to the hotel. However, there is quite a distance between both buildings. Without overthinking things, Jack says everyone would need to jump across it.
Now, when Tom Cruise is your role model, or if you have his DNA in your body, this might sound like a walk in the park. Unfortunately, those are little girls and a wife whose only crime was following her husband to his new place of assignment.
What happens next is probably one of the most iconic scenes in the movie. Annie overcomes her fears and jumps to the next building, almost spraining her legs. Jack then throws his girls across the hotel top to the next building before jumping himself. The leader of the rebel group shows Jack a flag of his company, Cardiff, with his face on it. The message is clear: he plans on hunting Jack down at all costs. As the family escape, they make their way to a building with some offices. Jack looks outside and sees that the rebels do not plan on stopping anytime soon, as they have a tank outside. He tells the people to get away from the impending destruction. The tank fires into the building, destroying parts of it. As they gain entrance, John uses the body of someone who lost his life during the blast to hide. The rebels take the lives of survivors and eventually leave. After waiting till night, Jack tells his family that they need to get to the American embassy, and they prepare to leave after seeing the location on a map that Annie finds. Unfortunately, one of the rebels sees them and begins to call out to the others. Jack tackles him to the floor and pleads with him to be quiet, but the rebel continues to call the attention of others. Jack has had enough of this human canary and takes his life, to the horror of his wife who watches him.
People will go to great lengths to protect the ones they love. The actions of Jack are those of a desperate father and husband who just wants to live. Wars and political upheavals and disputes have far more reaching effects than we know. They really change people in shocking ways and manners.
He finds a motorbike key on the rebel and they are all huddled up. Jack and his family cover their faces as they ride through the deserted and burning city. They see a large number of rebels in front of them as they ride. He knows that it will be futile to try to run and they will be caught, so he continues to ride through the mob. They allow him to pass since he is unrecognizable. Unfortunately, the motorbike falls down because of the huge crowd. One of the rebels goes to help him pick up the bike and he locks eyes with Jack. Although he recognizes him, he doesn't attack him but lets him and his family go. After getting to the US Embassy, they find it empty and barricaded. Jack manages to climb the rubble to get a clearer view of things. However, he sees rebels coming out of the building. Moments later, the embassy building explodes. Jack and his family continue their search for safety and get to a garden run owned by an old Buddhist. He tries to drive them away initially, but later takes pity on them and hides them in the garden. The rebels show up in the garden and demand Jack and his family from the old man. As they push him around, Jack tries to get the guns of one of them. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned. Annie is exposed and captured, and although Jack fights off some of the rebels and gets a gun, it is empty. The rebels capture him and prepare to finish him off, but the evil leader of the group has other plans. He tries to assault Annie before Jack's eyes. Fortunately, Hammond and Kenny intervene and take down all the rebels in a shootout. Hammond leads them to a place where they eat and rest briefly. He then shows them a path through a river leading to the Vietnamese border and tells them that if they can get there, they will be able to go back to America. Jack thanks Hammond for coming to their rescue, but Hammond feels partly responsible for the rebellion. He explains to Jack how rich, first-world countries take advantage of not-so-rich countries like the one they are in. They do this by giving them the infrastructure that these countries cannot pay for, and so they end up taking their money by practically owning and controlling the country.
Hammond accepts his role in the problem of the country. It's a moment of truth, and he speaks out about things that a lot of people in authority are probably uncomfortable talking about. In a bid to make the world a better place, fairness and transparency must be in place.
Later that night, Jack is awakened by some noise. He sees Hammond and Kenny with their guns as they quietly move about. Hammond gives instructions to them on how to get away as he and Kenny try to defend them. A gun battle begins and Kenny loses his life in the encounter. Although Hammond manages to take out 2 snipers, he is also seriously injured. As he leads the family out, he collapses on the floor. Although Jack tries to help him, it is quite late though, as a truck driven by a rebel approaches them. Hammond shoots at the driver before sacrificing himself. Stressed, fatigued, and desperate, Jack begins to cave into fear, but Annie encourages him. He goes alone to the river to find a boat to take them to the border they are trying to get to. Unfortunately, the rebels come there. Although he tries to fight, he is overpowered. Lucy runs out of her cover and the rebels capture her as well. They place a gun in her hands to take her father's life or get shot at herself. Annie, however, comes from behind and attacks the leader of the rebels with a weapon. Jack also overpowers the second rebel. They eventually finish off the leader of the rebels and his henchmen. They get to the boat and row towards the Vietnamese border. The rebels, however, come after them in hot pursuit. They are caught between the hateful rebels and the Vietnamese soldiers who warn them not to come any further as they do not have the required permission to come into Vietnam. Jack says they are seeking refuge and continue to row the boat. As soon as they come into Vietnamese waters, the soldiers defend them and warn the rebels not to fire at Jack's family as they are now in their territory. As the movie comes to an end, Jack is seen at the hospital with his family as he makes a recovery from the brutal experience he suffered in this South Asian country.
This movie defines cliffhanging. It's brilliantly told and evokes deep emotion in all the viewers, except if you have no emotions. Each scene builds up with so much tension and suspense and leaves the viewers guessing what next could happen. It's also the story of the resolve of a man to defend his family at all costs. While it has some really violent scenes, it's also a great watch if you can enjoy a suspense-filled thriller. Please subscribe to the channel to be notified when we upload. Also, don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.